Hello, I am Radagast with Global Mission to Peace TV, and this is Mystic View, number 35, and I am here with my co-host, Shelley. Hello, Shelley.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
And tonight's topic is going to be on a prolific author of really, really great information, particularly applicable to what we are experiencing. Some of the things that most of our alternative audience is very interested in. Of course, so I will read off, but I mean, let's just say it involves the Anunnaki, ancient technologies, how those technologies tie in with today, the social engineering that is part of that whole plan, for good and for ill. Social engineering, again, we want to stay out of polarity as best as possible. Social engineering doesn't have to be something that's bad. It can be. Currently, I would say that what we're experiencing, and especially in the Western world, is not good. And you could say it takes a lot of forms. You find it in religion. Or at least certain strains of it, if not all strains. I mean, again, religion is a form of social engineering. Doesn't mean it's bad. It's social engineering. Anyway, so what I'm going to do, just to give people a little flavor of who this man is, Joseph P. Farrell. Okay, Farrell is Farrell or Farrell. And there's not necessarily a chronological order, although the way he's written his books are meant to build on it. I think one of his first books was Cosmic Wars, but starting with the kind of just a bibliography, actually seems like some of the first ones are here. This one came out in this May of this year. It's Hidden Finance, Rogue Networks, and Secret Sorcery: The Fascist International, 911, and Penetrated Operations. That's the title of the book. Joseph has also been a professor. He was educated at Oxford, and he happens to be a PhD in patristics and theology. Patristics is the study of the early church fathers, by the way, like in the first 1,000 years before the Reformation. So another book he's written is Rotten to the Common Core: Public Schooling, Standardized Tests, and the Surveillance State. The Third Way: Nazi International, European Union, and Corporate Fascism. Okay, how's that for a few titles for you? Then some of his earlier stuff is The Giza Death Star Destroyed, Ancient War for Future Science. It's a trilogy. Babylon's Banksters: The Alchemy of Deep Physics, High Finance, and Ancient Religion. The SS Brotherhood of the Bell, NASA's Nazis, JFK, and Magic 12. Covert Wars and the Clash of Civilizations, UFOs, Oligarchs, and Space Secrecy. The Grid of the Gods, The Aftermath of the Cosmic War and the Physics of the Pyramid Peoples. LBJ and the Conspiracy to Kill Kennedy, A Coalescence of Interests. Transhumanism, a grimoire of alchemical agendas. Saucers, SWAT stickers, and PSYOPs, A History of Breakaway Civilization, Hidden Aerospace Technologies, and Psychological Operations. Roswell and the Reich, The Nazi Connection. I might come up with say a little on that. Then he also has some books that he wrote on his early kind of PhD in patristics. The Mystagogy of the Holy Spirit. Back to his other stuff, The Reich of the Black Sun. Secrets of the Unified Field, The Philadelphia Experiment, The Nazi Bell, and Discarded Theory. Giza Death Star Deployed. Yahweh, the Two-Faced God, Theology, Terrorism, and Topology, Apocalypse Theater, Volume 1. And then I got kind of, I mean, he's got a few others, but that gives you an idea of not only the topics, but how prolific an author he is. And his books are very well researched. Much of that research or the papers he's working with he puts in his books. I just finished reading a book that actually wasn't mentioned in there. Genes, Giants, Monsters, and Men. The Surviving Elites of the Cosmic War and Their Hidden Agenda. I will be putting some links, at least on the Modwiz site. We don't usually put links on the GMOP site, at least not, that has not been part of things. Linking, what I'm going to do, there was this one wonderful interviewer who has since passed over. Her name was Georgianne Hughes. She had a show called The Byte Show. She has 50 or 75 hours of conversations with him on topics. Like, there's like 20 shows based on with the cosmic war as its theme. Some of the shows are an hour, some of the shows are 2 hours, some of the shows are an hour and a half, an hour and 20 minutes. Grid of the Gods, Vipers of Venice. Of course, Vipers of Venice has a lot to do with modern banking, which does tie, and of course he ties it in with how modern banking has roots in some pretty ancient banking. So Joseph P. Farrell.
That is so fascinating. Where's your favorite spot to jump in with all of that? How do you summarize? Take me to the back page.
Well, what was that one title that kind of stimulated me that I wanted to say something about? I'm gonna look it up for a second.
And the book that you've just written, is that his most recent one? Because there certainly has been a lot in our alternative media with regard to giant skeletons and that type of information coming out now.
No, this is actually not one of his most recent ones. And I just think one of the books that he wrote, I think it would be kind of funny because we're speaking with you, is called Shelley Unbound, Discovering
Send me the link.
Discovering Frankenstein's True Creator. Now, excuse me, tying into that a little bit, we can bring in Dan Winter, and a very recent Dan Winter, who we've had as a guest at least 3 times now.
With a whole lot more to come yet.
And he in a very recent video I watched of Dan Winter, he held up a Joseph P. Farrell book. I forget exactly which book it was, but obviously he sees the value of Joseph's work.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I'm looking for. I'll be with you in a moment. Oh, the reason I brought up
Dan Winter?
Dan Winter, because I'm a little
Scattered looking?
Yes, I am. Let me come back into the show and I'll look after. One of the reasons I brought up Dan Winter. What?
Was it the math? Was it the physics? What's the common denominator between him and Dan Winter, let's ask?
I think physics.
Mm-hmm.
And
life.
But so what's interesting is since we had Shelley's Frankenstein, in one of the talks that Dan did with Vincent Bridges, who talked very much about Edward Kelly and John Dee, who were alchemists, and tying in that there was the golem of Prague that the Kabbalists had constructed to protect them, and they lost control of it for a while. It kind of ran amok. And that Shelley's Frankenstein is actually based on that golem of Prague. Mm-hmm. I just thought, so we're tying in some things here. I think.
So what happened to Golem? Did they get him under control again, or where did that go?
Well, what it is, there was a word written on his head, and I knew the word, but it was like they had to remove one letter. And
was this Enochian letters?
I think they were Hebrew letters, and they spelled out a word, that the difference between life and sleep or whatever. It was like removing an A from whatever word it was.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And so they kind of had to, since Golem was made from clay or something, all they had to do was get him down long enough and get that letter off, and they became unanimated.
Ooh, that's interesting.
And supposedly it's stored in the rafters of a synagogue in Prague.
Well, that's pretty cool, because if you look at Dan Winter's information is all about those Hebrew letters and where that fits into the golden mean and the donut, and how that is actually embedded in our very own DNA and the DNA of the cosmos. So I can imagine what removing a codon or a code or two from your DNA could do.
Okay. It was funny. There was one of the I remember I read a title and I went, oh, I'd like to comment more about that. And as I'm going through this, for some reason, I don't know if they've shifted things on me.
Does he have an ultimate perspective? If you summed him up in a nutshell, all that research that Joseph P. Farrell has done.
Yes.
Does he have a direction that he thinks we are moving in?
Well, to me, if it's anything, he has something called the topology of how you go from the one prime thing, or God before anything is created, and how that initial splitting of God into create other things created. And in many, he doesn't use the same language as Dan, but basically he's talking about fractalization.
Right.
That no matter how many times anything is divided from this prime something, it never loses, it can't exist without being a fractal or alive and owing its existence from that primal something.
And containing the complete blueprint or the holographic image?
Yes.
And also, does it come down to numbers, for instance, 3? Does he address that?
Yes, actually, in many ways, in this topology, there is no 2. You go from 1 to 3.
Yeah, explain that.
Well, because the moment this primal 1 splits into 2 parts, the mind thinks, oh, now there's 2. But the fact is, the one thing still remains. In many ways, this creation of 2 distinct parts are different than the original 1. It wasn't like the 1 stays 1 and now there's 2.
Right.
There was the 1 that now there's 2 fractals of. And so what you have is the 2 united into 1. It's almost like if you look at the yin yang, there's really 3 if you take out the dots, you have what looks like 2 things, but they're part of the 1. So it's really 3 things that are there. And that's kind of the basic topology. And then everything, and then from there on, you have fractalizations or pieces of the hologram as it becomes more and more specialized.
And so would those be balanced as in polarities? Could we look at it like male and female, or is that irrelevant at that point?
The way I see it is polarities kind of set up a field. I mean, he didn't quite get into that, but I mean, I think what is inherent in going from 1 to 3 is that polarity is just like 2 doesn't, in many ways, doesn't really exist as far as things go. Polarity is an illusion.
So it would be more like electromagnetic, as in that's the 1, can operate as 1.
Right.
That is, can it be influenced individually and create effect?
Well, it's almost like nothing can really exist other than within the primal thing. So even when it looks like you have 2, they're really kind of holding a field in between. And that's where everything really happens in the field. Almost nothing is absolute. So if nothing is absolute, then the whole concept of polarity, and from a real objective look at it, is kind of illusory.
So if we looked at it from consciousness then, from the perspective of consciousness, it's like you could either be love, be everything that is, or you could break it down into parts so that you can experience what this is to be loved or be loved, as one example.
Yes, and I think it also sets up some nice room for play, room for bliss, room for sharing. I mean, really, the spirit is androgynous. And so since spirit in flesh, and then we have the genderizing of flesh, even that polarity is an illusion. I mean, there is an aspect of it being real, but the more we focus on that polarity, the more dysfunction we have. The more we function on the unity in different forms, the more coherence we have, the more we share.
Yeah, and that sharing really is bringing it back always to hold the oneness.
Right.
So to be able to experience all the parts, to be the particle and the wave, to be all the parts, but to have the perspective always of the one.
Yes. And the other thing he kind of brings out is, although there's much knowledge and inspiration to be gotten from any of the various scriptures, to try to think you can source your creator from a book is a little, is what has created such misguidance.
It'd be a little bit like looking at the finger pointing at the moon and thinking that's what the information is, instead of looking at where it's directing your attention.
Yes. And also, just the perils, we'll say, of singular revelation of information from one person or one source, and then saying that that's it. I was even sharing with our friend the ambassador how, in many ways, I feel that sourcing the one from scripture is as if like it's like a last will and testament. It's like as if like it's not really alive in our hearts, so we have to go to the last, the revelations, as if like I better leave this because I'm dying, and without this you'll be lost, as opposed to turning into our hearts. And to me, I always feel that all scripture needs to be read from our heart, not with our eyes. Basically, God has to be looking over your shoulder as you read these things. So, because you think that any of this has passed through people without some form of addition is to be naive.
Well, what's your feeling when you're reading all of this work from Joseph P. Farrell? Does it leave you, I mean, it's obviously beyond curiosity for you. It's like this starving need to know, or what?
From what Joseph is doing is giving me good scholarship to present to others, that they might experience who they are and what they are in creation the way I feel that I understand it and other people understand it.
That's very useful. To
receive the empowerment of, I mean, one of the ways I recently did this. I mean, again, I like to. There was lots of good stuff from various scriptures, and that's the other thing. I mean, when we look at the Abrahamic religions, we're starting kind of late in human history. Humans have been around for a really long time, and if Michael Cremo is correct about some of the stratigraphy where modern human skeletons have been found and carbon dating has any relevance, we're talking about millions of years. And in some cases, again, depending on whether geologists have their timing right on these layers, but according to scientific of what layers represent, skeletons have been found over 300 years old, modern human skeletons. That's a long time to be on a planet, and to then try and think that God hid until a couple of thousand years ago. And when you read the texts, the more ancient texts, not only do you, including the Vedas, not only do you find that God's been around forever, of course. I mean, how could God not be around forever? Because we wouldn't be here if God hadn't been there first. But when you look at even texts that are older than the revealed text, you find that the revealed texts are highly inspired by texts that have preceded them. You could say there's a form of mimicry with a certain cultural shaping, with social engineering.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it.
So for me, again, I like the fact that what Joseph is doing is bringing through scholarship, not just, not the normal kind of videos that we get where, people have read a little of this, a little of this, a little of this, and they create their own story, which is perfectly, that's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do. Great. Find things and create things from them. Mm-hmm. But some of our creations could misdirect. Again, this is when we're talking about trying to understand our placement in the cosmos. Art is very good. The creativity is very good for revealing, how we feel. But there's a body of deep knowledge based on deep physics. Like one of the things Joseph reveals in this book is how the various measurements, like, the megalithic structures around the world, and how they seem to be built on a basic measure. And he gets into like how these measures, no matter where, a Scottish guy discovered this when he was doing megaliths in Scotland. He's like, there's a certain unit of measurement that is not only all over Scotland, it's all over England. And then when they found out later, it's also all over South America. I mean, basically anywhere you see these like pyramids and other structures, you find these units of measurement. And when we started getting more modern science, and we could do things like compute the speed of light, the rotation of the Earth, the width of the Earth, the distance from the sun, you start seeing in these measurements, based on whether they're the square root of 2, 3, or whatever, you start seeing different numbers come out that basically match cosmic proportions.
Yes, so, and even locations on the planet. For instance, say Washington to the Vatican. It's fractals again. That's exactly what's been constructed all over our planet.
Well, that's the next book I'm buying, is Grid of the Gods, because that is kind of what I think he gets into, is the various structures around the world, whether or not they're pyramids or temples, and how they coordinate through ley lines, maybe just even latitudes and longitudes, and how there's a certain latitude where a lot of the buildings got built. This
is where it comes down to, it's simply the tool, and in whose hands will dictate how it's used.
Yes.
So this knowledge has been used and known about and has been used for positive, but in the wrong hands, it can be used very much against the population and the planet.
Joseph has alluded that his understanding, based on his topology, has kind of revealed to him kind of alchemical secrets. Mm-hmm. And he says that most people go, oh, please share with us. He says there's 2 reasons he won't share. One is his understanding in the wrong hands is bad.
Yes.
Also, his understanding in the wrong psychology will shatter people. Mm-hmm. There are certain people who, to know how the cosmos is set, would psychologically disable them. They would, so he said he's only shared it with a few people. And so that's pretty profound. Mm-hmm. On his part. I understand that. When he said both of those things, I understand totally what he means. Mm-hmm. The Nazi international thing, it really kind of ties into how that there's a continuation from the ancient knowledge, and the fact when the Nazis went into India and started reading, the Vedas are really texts on different subjects. Some of them on yoga, some of them on diet, some of them on medicine, but there's also texts on pure physics. And they're not written in the flowery language that you see a real Sanskrit reader sees, basically a physics text, okay? So one of the things that are in these texts was the Vimana, or their flying machine that they speak about. And that was where the Nazis kind of got their basic information to start building what's known as the bell, that thing that seemed to defy gravity, and might be what later led to the research of developing Earth-based UFOs, which is what brings me to Roswell and the Reich. That's what I want to comment on.
Excellent.
What Joseph has said, and I tend to believe this, is the way the controllers try to manage people. It's almost like how they manage right brain and left brain people. So when Roswell happened, the first thing that came out was UFOs. Okay, we've recovered an alien spacecraft. That was for the right brain people. Then, now there's a whole group of people who go, oh, please, UFOs. So the next report is it was a weather balloon. So the skeptics go, oh, that works. He said what was really being covered up and who came to investigate it is very interesting. That's beyond the scope of where I'm going here. It was actually Nazi technology. And what the U.S. government didn't want anybody to know was supposedly the foe they had vanquished was still operating with technology that they didn't have. Mm-hmm. And so that's why there's the whole story about alien bodies and whatever. But Joseph is absolutely sure, based on some of the deeper research of some of these paperclip Nazi scientists that the United States brought over that started our rocket program, because they had all of that technology. Mm-hmm. And then the Soviet Union also got their portion of scientists. So basically saying that the Roswell crash was the crash of these Foo Fighters in many ways, okay? And when Admiral Byrd conducted his little research down there, and they used the cover story, we discovered a portal into the middle of the earth. That was to distract people from the real report, which is still classified, over these craft that could fly from pole to pole with astonishing speed. Mm-hmm. Just last night in one of the Cosmic War, what he was saying, he read the 2 surrender documents from the Japanese and from the Germans. Japanese is the military surrenders, the emperor surrenders, and the Diet, which is their parliament. We unconditionally surrender. When you look at the German surrender, is the German military surrenders and all their forces, not the government. Mm-hmm. Nothing. And they kind of went, well, Hitler committed suicide. There's no government to surrender. We're what's left. So the Japanese surrendered their government and whatever. The Nazis surrendered their military.
Mm-hmm. That makes a whole lot more sense. I like that.
Oh, 1 second, please. I have to interrupt.
Really, that's better. Yeah, you're muted. Well, that whole thing would set my mind at ease. Knowing that it was actually Nazis makes so much more sense.
Thank you. That was somebody who we were supposed to meet after the show, which we don't. So anyway, basically what the very surrender document implies is that the government is still extant, still around. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that's where there basically in his Nazi International, he's basically saying the Nazis are alive and well, and probably the Uber or the hidden hand behind the government. I mean, even when he gets into the JFK thing, assassination, the JFK said he wanted to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces. The CIA was part of the OSS, of which the SS came over with paperclip and kind of founded. So when he said he was going to stamp out the CIA, what he's saying was, I'm going to get rid of the Nazis. Mm-hmm. And when you start seeing one of the people who was on the Warren Commission, which is, about the Kennedy assassination, was a man who shared a box with Hitler at the 1936 Olympics.
Yes.
I mean, the list is endless, but that's probably the most amazing thing. So anyway, so Joseph is traveling through history, connecting a lot of dots that are relevant right up to today. But unlike most conspiracy theorists who are just pointing out, ooh, be afraid, this is empowerment through knowledge. This isn't about conspiracy theory, because these are not conspiracies. These are research. And through that spiritual connection and how what the real value is, and the value is us, the created. No matter, even though he said he doesn't doubt that which revealed them, even in all the various texts, Popol Vuh, wherever you go, they all say that there have been 5 iterations of humanity. This is the 5th, and that minimally this one was engineered. They seem to point that all of them were, but specifically this one was engineered. So, but even when he speaks, let's take, it's not a polarity, but he's kind of speaking at that when you speak of these controllers, and in the ancient sense, there really was an elite of sort. That you kind of have we'll call them the Enlil and Enki camps. Okay. And so basically, when the original workers who were they were called the Igigi or Igigi, who were complaining about the labors because they were digging all kinds of things through Iraq and the Middle East, and that the work was basically killing them. They couldn't do the toil, and they basically knew of the engineering possibilities. I mean, Enlil was engineered, so was Enki. So they basically said, "Can you engineer us a Lulu," which meant a worker man. Because apparently there were other kinds of men that they knew of, historically at least, or maybe even already on the planet. Because even if you go back to the Bible, and Cain was being cast out of the garden, he was worried about the mark he was given because the people might kill him. You're having this story where it seems like there's only 4 or 5 people in the world, and he's worried about the people outside the garden that are going to kill him. Sounds a little busy out there. So Enlil goes, okay, I'll do a worker. So he calls one of the Kadishtu, which Dan mentions, the life designers. And these are the ones who actually work with the creator. They understand the creator. They understand that life is only given by the true creator, not the engineers, the spirit. And she gets called, and Enlil says, we need a Lulu. She goes, well, I need Enki, because he knows the science. He knows the physics. She knows how to put the spirit into something, but she needs somebody who can craft something. So to me, what I'm also seeing in here is the 2 basic sides of these controllers is you have an administrative side who are capable of almost nothing except administrating and giving orders. And then you have the other part of the family that actually has skills and capabilities. And we see that now in today's world. I mean, when's the last piece of music you heard a Rockefeller or a Rothschild offer the world? When's, they have the great art collections. How many of them painted them? Mm-hmm. All the physics that are being discovered. Are there any Rothschilds or Rockefellers or Rothschilds being no scientists? No. So what it always comes down to is, okay, you have these global controllers, all the talent is in us. The labor is in us, the creativity is in us, and the talent is in us. And Enki saw to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, not to derail the conversation, but just to add a little bit more overview, I think, to maintain the oneness perspective, is that we've always had the positive and negative, but what it really comes down to is we've always had support or challenge, and that's what we find within us. So if we are the manufactured designs, yes, we have the God spirit in us, But yes, we are always going to have within us the elements that support us and the elements that challenge us. And they both ultimately will work together. The challenges make us stronger, smarter, wiser. And the sport, that's kind of our little rest areas where we can recover and enjoy what we've gained through the challenge, support and challenge. But back to Enki. He was the good guy.
Well, from our perspective, see, this is where I want to try to remove the polarity. Mm-hmm. From Enlil's side, it's all about order, law and order. Okay, this is how we do it because they're not creative. So for them, good is what's real simple. Having other people do your thinking for them by order, and life is good. On the other side, you have another definition of what is good, and that is shareable. And in many ways, what we're thinking about here is the administrative side is where entropy comes from. Mm-hmm. Enki's side represents negentropy. Mm-hmm. Because what these gifted Anunnaki were doing was sharing not only, I mean, they had to share spirit or they wouldn't have anything that was alive, but they were willing to share their technology. They were willing to, was where they would create civilizations that to me are part of a divine plan, but ones where it was about, where the ones who kind of had the ability shared their technologies and their administrative abilities with people who in many ways didn't want to be bothered with administration. It's like, let me grow some stuff. Let me go play. Let me go do the music. Let me paint a picture, And so it was a shareable civilization where everybody benefited. Mm-hmm. So, it created energy. It grew out. It blossomed. It was like nature. It was self-duplicating. If people looked in, if there were simple tribes or simple people, they would look in and go, I want in. Because they would see the joy. They would see the bliss of sharing, of being what I'm going to call nanobots of the creator. The creator creates, macro things. And then when it needs to find detail, just like today's scientists, they want to do like real microscopic thing, they send in nanobots, except they're technology. We are the living technology. And so to me, to complete creation after God rested, let's just, use that thing. When God rested on the seventh day, it wasn't returning to work on the next day one. It was our beginning the work as the creations to do the fine detail work, to allow that creativity to blossom, to explore the nature that was given to us and nature to educate us of what abundance looks like, what symbiosis looks like.
And also to ground that consciousness into this denser area, really to send the consciousness even deeper or more expansive, however you want, whatever your point of reference is.
And so for me, in Joseph Farrell's work, the intellect, our need to want to know more is very much satisfied, but it gets satisfied in a way of utility, where you can become inspired and realize that we can reclaim our greatness, but it comes through coordination. It comes through understanding that the God that we want to know is the God in our heart, in the moment, that shareable God. The God that shares with us and then looks for us to share our creativity, our love.
Sounds like you're describing the God of life as opposed to the God of death.
Yeah, well, Joseph actually embraced that is called the corn God, which is the fertility concept of abundance, and the debt God, where God created you and created a contract that you didn't agree to, and now you owe God. Mm-hmm. And that's where sacrifice comes in. And when you go into the Mayans, you find out that this, I think it was Mayans who had Quetzalcoatl. Mm-hmm. And they describe Quetzalcoatl as the one that gave them, may have even engineered them, but also gave them all of their arts and gave them the civil. And there was no sacrifice. They say that sacrifice came later after this ugly group grew up within them and created enough people that resonated with that, and then basically overthrew it as in a coup. And that's when Quetzalcoatl fled. And given this was kind of in Mexico, it's very interesting. The two animals that are represented by Enki and Enlil. Enlil is like the eagle. Okay, what was the Nazi symbol? What was the American symbol? And then the Enlil was represented by a serpent. The Mexican flag has an eagle with a serpent in its claws. And anyway, so it was when the eagle landed that sacrifice began. The corn god was replaced with the debt god. And since God is infinite, the debt it's almost like the Federal Reserve. The debt can never be repaid. So it's just keep it coming, boys and girls. Just, how many more sacrifices? Forever. Forever.
Well, until God of corn rises.
Or until you exhaust your supply. And that's what entropy is about. At some point, entropy uses all the energy because it only consumes, it doesn't produce. Negentropy creates coherence, and in that coherence, in that spin, it produces energy. That's what 0 point energy is based on. And just like nature, it will forever reproduce itself. And each fruit you eat contains the seed for more. One avocado, there may be only one seed in each avocado, but how many avocados does a tree produce? So how many trees can come from one tree? This is nature. This is nature telling us how the universe is meant to be. This is nature that God created telling us what God is about.
I like it.
And so part of what I'm doing is we hope on Mystic View to be able to at one point have Joseph P. Farrell grace us with a conversation, an interview, call it what you will, and share what he has. And for us to and also an acknowledgement of the inspiration that his books and his talks and his presence and his, and ultimately his love and his sharing. His being an example of love and sharing.
Very meaningful work he has contributed.
Yes.
His service is very meaningful. I'm sure it fills him, but it also does a lot for the rest of us.
He's being
the DNA of oneness.
He's being in service. And like I said, so to me, this one's been about Joseph P. Farrell, and it's kind of a shout out. Hey, Joseph, I love your work. I love you as a human being. And I want, this is an acknowledgement of what you have done and given us. But I also, Dan Winter has graced us 3 times. And like I said, Dan Winter held up J.P. Farrell's book. I see them as natural allies. And I see both of them in assisting us in our new paradigm production. And the new paradigm, what we're trying to produce is a reclaiming of the divine voice within, so that as I like to say, God, the world is in God's hands, and God's hands are on the end of all our arms. But those hands will not be doing God's work unless they can hear God's voice in our hearts in real time. God hasn't abandoned us. God isn't living outside history. God is in every moment. And because if it wasn't for that omnipresence, we would not have our existence. We have our existence in God. And so I just, Joseph Farrell with his works, and again, he does interviews all over the place. He did 50 to 100 hours with George N. Hughes, if not more. You go to Dan Winter's sites. He has multiple sites. Each site is loaded. Each page you click on, you'll be scrolling for half a day. It's each words, multiple links, multiple YouTubes. It's not just the output, but the sharing of the output. As he does these things, as they're new, he puts value on them, and a very humble and modest charge to be in real time as it comes out. But once it's been out, he then puts it up. He doesn't hoard it.
Mm-hmm. And nature doesn't hoard. Nature's about flowing. So I think that's a really beautiful example.
Yeah.
To follow.
And so what Joseph has done is, like, in all these interviews, he gives you so much from out of his books, but there are certain gems, and a lot of it is the more technical stuff. And of course, the sale of books support him doing his research. It keeps him having a purpose instead of a job. He brings skills, his research skills, and selling his books allows him to fund his research, which is his skill. It's not his job. Job is, when people, we need more jobs.
Doesn't that bring us to education? You said once that he had spoken something about education as well.
Well, yes, it's because he finished his he went to Oxford. Mm-hmm. It was before the kind of cancer of the American education system started penetrating Europe. Mm-hmm. And professors were professors. They set their own curriculum, and they were professors of something. They didn't need to be certified by people who had no specialties. Right now, certification is by these people who have EDD after their name. I don't know if it's Doctor of Education. I don't know what that means. But basically, you have the enlils of the education system who do nothing except tell you that you can teach, but you have to be certified. That's what they do. They give you certification, even though they don't have the credentials to be your judge, but they have set themselves up as judges. Mm-hmm. To judge. The point that Joseph makes, at least one of the interviews, is Albert Einstein could not teach physics these days without being certified. Charles Darwin could not teach biology without being certified. In the old days, if you had published books, you could just, anybody, please come teach at our place. Now you need to be certified from the people who have no specialties other than education.
They're trying to recreate the golem. What they've done is they're trying to take out that component of creativity. So one of those Hebrew letters, they're trying to ditch that, because now the credentials only come by how well you're able to repeat what those people have their job, because they were able to repeat what was told to them. It's not creative thinking. They're not getting ahead. They're only getting a paycheck because they're able to repeat what they were told to say. It comes down to maybe a little bit of memory work, but after that, it kind of falls flat. So it sounds a lot like just give them some more fluoride, lull them into a place where we can completely diminish at least one section of your DNA.
Well, who first used fluoride on populations? It was the Nazis.
Yeah.
In the work camps, concentration camps, call them what you will, because they needed people to be docile and as unthinking as possible. Basically, it's kind of like a form of lithium. Mm-hmm. And so now
what's in the chemtrails?
I think aluminum and barium.
Oh, and there's a whole lot more, actually. I was just going there because you said lithium, but there's quite a soup.
Well, the interesting thing is, it seems chemtrails and fluoridation have similar roots. And here is basically what it is fluoride comes from aluminum production. Okay, it's kind of like in the ore. When you're done producing aluminum, you have a toxic waste that would have to be marked as toxic waste and would have to be carried to a special dump.
Or put in people's water.
Well, you're right. Well, so what you have is, in one case, they would have to pay to dispose of this toxin. They have turned it around where they get paid to give you their toxin. Mm-hmm. Ooh, doesn't that sound like some pretty creepy capitalism? So now we have I guess we're kind of from mining coal or I think it's from mining coal where there's certain processing that creates kind of this coal dust that, again, because of all the different minerals that can have lead and other things, and lead is one of the components. Aluminum, there's all these byproducts. So again, this leftover from production is toxic. It would cost money to dispose of, or else it just sits there poisoning the ground. Well, apparently they found a place to sell this to the people who spray them in our skies.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's accomplishing a few things. It's making the atmosphere a little more livable for certain species and less for us, less so for us.
Well, there's a really good video that I know I spoke of in the past, but it was the Mount Shasta kind of county meeting about chemtrails. Now, in Suffolk County, New York, they actually got organized enough that the county passed an ordinance telling the federal government you cannot spray over Suffolk County, Long Island. Suffolk County, now Long Island is that 100-mile long island off of New York City. About 80 miles of it is Suffolk County. So basically, most of Suffolk County, most of Long Island is now free of chemtrails, done at the local county level. So this is a 15-minute piece, which is a condensation featuring one of the lawyers who represented for the people of Suffolk County that made it happen, along with people who were testing water, finding the water, people who were saying the trout counts are down, the difficulty with growing, and the lawyer coming up and saying this is all absolutely true. This is not made up. This stuff that people are finding in their soil, in their water, in their lakes, the high pHs rather than alkaline or base, it is all coming from the stuff that they're spraying in the skies. So this isn't just about us, what we inhale, the influencing the sun. It's actually killing the nature. It is an anti-life program, at least for the kind of life that we think of as life.
Human folk.
Yeah, human folk.
Earth and all our relations, all our animals, plants, minerals, insects.
Yeah.
Flying ones, crawling ones.
And so some people might go, ooh, the dirty cabal. You know something? I can't fault. I mean, as dark as that is, my biggest thing is when I talk to somebody around me and I go, what about the chemtrails? Oh, that's just contrails.
Yeah, or the pilots who deny it. Because why? They're being paid to be quiet.
Yes.
And maybe not all of them actually do know it. I really can't quite believe that some of those pilots are actually innocent.
Right.
Especially when there's actually court cases documenting.
So people, when you're ready to blame the cabal, please remember the people flying the planes are not Rockefellers and Rothschilds. All right? The people piloting those planes are your neighbors.
And they value their paycheck more than the life on this planet, apparently.
The people who you might need to bring to a town or county meeting to complain about the chemtrails are denying it. Your own family might go, but the people on the news told me that. The people on the news are paid to tell you that. The people on the news do not love you. People in your own family who are telling you this love you. So people are making a choice that to ignore the people they love and pay it and get their information from people who do not love them. This is where we're breaking apart, people. This is where we're not sharing. This is where we're not embracing the love that will save us and unite us. We have to know. I mean, again, if you're going to call people go, oh, nobody knows. Almost every family has their conspiracy nut in it. But who do they ignore them? Oh, please, go away with that silliness. So basically what it is they're denying love. The people who love them are telling them about something, and they're taking their information from liars, paid liars, people who are reading a script, people who don't know them, so therefore they can't love them. They don't love them. And people are making a choice between those who don't love them from information from people who love them. So people start choosing love. Unite, share. Please. I mean, the dirty work is not done by the cabal. The orders are given by the cabal, and those of us who are not embracing the sharing and the love are kind of turning a blind eye to what they're doing. Oh, I have to provide for my family. Well, your family's getting sprayed too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, in all fairness, there is some cognitive dissonance, and it is painful for people to have to become aware of this reality in this way. So we got to cut them a little bit of slack, but you know, we'll give you some space, but really we need to find the honesty with what is around us, and then take steps toward, as you were saying, making sure that whatever it is we're doing is for the betterment, for the highest good, which is a shareable quality. If it's not shareable, it's not negentropic. It's going to end life, not sustain and build and nourish life. It's so simple.
Yeah, and I thank you, Shelley, for that, because I'm not, when I speak with my passion, it's because it's part of it's from pain, actually. It's not condemning of people. It's just a need to look in the mirror. I mean, because there is too much finger pointing. The cabal, the cabal, the cabal. And again, we have to realize it's not a Rockefeller or a Rothschild on the news. It's not a Rockefeller or a Rothschild in the plains. It's one of us. It's one of us, people. And so it's not a condemnation. It's let us first of all start embracing love, and let us be, like as Shelley said, there's some pain in that. It's momentary. There's bliss after that pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's only
great bliss. But the bliss only comes hand in hand with compassion, and it has to be shareable.
Yes.
And that's how simple it is.
And so if it may not, I mean, when I sound condemnatory, I'm not. It's just pointing out. It's like, sometimes it's like ripping off the bandage. It's going to hurt a little bit, but it's got to come off. So I think, Joseph, I hope you will join us in the future. I hope to be able to get this to you so you can see it. We meant to make it shorter so you wouldn't have to do it. Sit through an hour, but hopefully you will find it enlightening and know it was inspired by your work. And Dan, your work has also inspired us, and also just acknowledge the one God for the absolute inspiration for even looking for this. So thank you, Shelley.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. God bless you.
Remember who you really are, and then take action on it.
Yes, help us with new paradigm production. It has to be produced. It's not a spectator. Production is not for spectating. There will be some spectators. It's almost like, to me, it's almost like a captain on a ship. You have a captain, you have people who know how to work the sails, who know how to do things, and then you're going to have a few passengers and passages along.
That's okay. It takes people a little while to kind of find what is meaningful to them, and that's the point. If you already know what's meaningful to you and you can provide it as your service, as Joseph Farrell is doing, awesome. And if not, I'm sure you'll be inspired by everyone around you that is.
Yes. Thank you again. Until next time.